My son went crazy when I refused to give him the money from selling my farm. His wife even threw a trash can through my car window, shattering it. 20 minutes later, both of them regretted ever being born. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button. Let me back up and tell you how a woman who spent 45 years growing corn and raising cattle ended up watching her own family self-destruct in spectacular fashion. Because trust me, this wasn't the retirement plan I had in mind. 3 weeks ago, I signed the papers that sold Caldwell Farm to a development company for $850,000. Not bad for land my late husband Joe and I bought for $47,000 back in 1979. Of course, that was before I knew my son Derek had been counting that money as his inheritance since he turned 16. At 68, I've learned a thing or two about reading people. So when Derek showed up at my kitchen door last Tuesday with that fake smile and nervous energy, I knew exactly what was coming. "Mom, we need to talk," Derek announced, trying to barge into my kitchen like he owned the place. Which, technically, he thought he did until I broke the news about the sale. "Derek, you're 32 years old. When you want to visit your mother, you call first and ask permission. You don't just show up demanding conversations." Derek's 32, works in insurance, and has the kind of soft hands that never touched a plow. His wife Tiffany? Well, Tiffany's the type who thinks farm fresh means buying organic at Whole Foods. They live in a McMansion with a mortgage that would choke a horse, drive matching BMWs, and vacation in places I can't pronounce. "Sorry, Mom, but this is important. What's this I'm hearing about you selling the farm?" Derek's face was already flushed, which told me everything I needed to know about where this conversation was headed. Mrs. Patterson said she saw moving trucks. I poured myself coffee, taking my sweet time. 45 years of dealing with problems had taught me that rushing never solved anything. Yep, sold it to Highland Development last Monday. Got a fair price, too. Without discussing it with family? Tiffany chimed in, her voice hitting that particular pitch that makes dogs howl. "Derek has roots here, Margaret. This is his heritage." Heritage. That's rich, coming from a woman who complained about the smell every time she visited. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw Joe's jawline but none of his character. "Derek, when's the last time you set foot on this property before today?" "That's not the point," he stammered. "We had plans." Now that was interesting. "What kind of plans?" Derek and Tiffany exchanged one of those married couple looks that speak volumes. Finally, Derek pulled out his phone and showed me some kind of spreadsheet. "We've been working with a financial advisor," Tiffany said, suddenly all business. "The farm could have been leveraged for much more than you got. We could have developed it ourselves, kept it in the family." I stared at that spreadsheet, rows and columns full of numbers that apparently represented my life's work. After 45 years of making every financial decision for this property, they thought they could waltz in with some city boy's advice and tell me I'd made a mistake. "You've been planning what to do with my land?" "Our land," Derek corrected. "I mean, eventually. Mom, you're 68. You should be thinking about your legacy, about taking care of family." That's when I set down my coffee cup and gave them both the look that used to make Derek clean his room without another word. "Boys, let me explain something to you. I've been managing this farm's finances since before you were born. I've survived 3 recessions, 2 droughts, and your father's cancer treatments. You think I don't know how to handle my own money?" Derek's face went from flush to red. "That's not what I meant. It's just, we have expenses, obligations, the kids' college funds, the house payment." Sounds like a personal problem. That's when Tiffany stood up so fast her chair fell over. "You selfish old woman. We've been counting on that money." And there it was. The truth, finally, out in the open. "Honey," I said, standing up myself and letting all 68 years of dealing with entitled nonsense show in my voice, "you've been counting chickens that were never going to hatch. This is my money from my land that I worked for my entire adult life." Derek wasn't done, though. "Mom, you don't understand. We've already made commitments based on money that was never yours to begin with," I finished. "Derek, that's called poor financial planning, not my problem." The kitchen went quiet except for the tick of Joe's old wall clock. Finally, Derek played what he thought was his trump card. "Fine, but we're not giving up on this. That money belongs to this family, and one way or another, We're going to make sure it stays in this family. Now, a younger woman might have been intimidated by that threat. But at 68, after 45 years of dealing with everything from loan officers to livestock, I wasn't about to be bullied by my own son. "Derek," I said, my voice calm as ice, "you just threatened your mother in her own kitchen over money you never earned. I suggest you think very carefully about your next move." The look in Derek's eyes when he realized I wasn't going to fold told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't the little boy who used to help me collect eggs. This was a stranger who'd decided that $850,000 was worth more than his relationship with his mother. "We'll see about that," he said, grabbing Tiffany's arm and heading for the door. After they left, Derek slamming my screen door so hard the frame rattled, I sat back down with my coffee and started making a mental list. Because 45 years of solving problems had taught me that when someone threatens you, you better be ready with more than just words. And Derek had just made the biggest mistake of his life, underestimating his mother. The phone started ringing at 6 a.m. sharp. Derek, of course, because apparently threatening your mother works up an appetite for early morning harassment. "Mom, I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday," he said, his voice artificially calm. "Maybe I came on a little strong." "A little strong?" I was already dressed and drinking coffee, having learned long ago that problems don't solve themselves by hiding under the covers. "Derek, you threatened me in my own kitchen." "I didn't threaten anyone. I just think we should discuss this like adults. Maybe over dinner tonight?" Tiffany's making her famous pot roast. Famous pot roast. The woman couldn't boil water without burning it. But sure, let's pretend she's Julia Child. "I'll pass. I've got plans." "What kind of plans?" Now that was interesting. Since when did Derek care about my social calendar? "Bridge with the girls, if you must know." "Cancel it." The order came out before he could stop himself, and I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "Excuse me? I mean," Derek backtracked quickly, "this is important family business. Surely your bridge game can wait." "Derek, I'm going to say this once. The farm is sold, the money is mine, and that's the end of the discussion." "We'll see about that." He hung up before I could respond, which was probably wise, because what I was planning to say wouldn't have been suitable for polite company. By 8 o'clock, my neighbor Frank was knocking on my door with a concerned expression and a thermos of coffee. "Maggie, you might want to take a look at this," he said, handing me his tablet. "Posted on the community Facebook page about an hour ago." The post was from Tiffany, and it was a masterpiece of manipulation disguised as concern. "Hi, everyone. I'm worried about my mother-in-law, Margaret Caldwell. She's been making some very strange financial decisions lately, and the family is concerned about her mental state. She recently sold the family farm without consulting anyone, and she's been acting paranoid and hostile when we try to discuss it. If anyone has recommendations for senior services or knows about resources for families dealing with elderly loved ones who might need help with decision-making, please let me know. We just want what's best for her." The post already had 15 comments, most from people I'd known for decades, offering sympathy and advice about dealing with difficult elderly relatives. I read through every single comment, my anger building with each well-meaning suggestion about getting help for poor Margaret. "Frank, hand me your phone." "What are you going to do?" "Something I should have done 40 years ago. Stop letting people underestimate me." I typed out my response to Tiffany's post. "Hi, everyone. This is Margaret Caldwell. I appreciate Tiffany's concern about my mental state, but I'm sharp enough to recognize financial manipulation when I see it. My son and daughter-in-law are upset because I sold my farm and refused to hand over my money to pay for their poor financial decisions. I'm 68, not 98, and I'm perfectly capable of managing my own affairs. Anyone who wants to verify my mental competency is welcome to call Dr. Phillips, who examined me last week and declared me in excellent health. Thanks for your concern." I posted it before Frank could object, then sat back to watch the fireworks. Within 10 minutes, the tide of comments had completely shifted. People I'd known for decades started chiming in about how sharp and capable I'd always been, how I'd single-handedly run the farm after Joe died, how ridiculous it was to suggest I couldn't handle my own money. My phone rang. "Dr. Phillips. Margaret, I just saw the Facebook drama. I want you to know that if anyone questions your mental competency, I have extensive documentation of your excellent cognitive function. Thank you, Dr. Phillips." I have a feeling I'm going to need that documentation sooner rather than later. Is there something else going on I should know about? I looked out my kitchen window and saw a car I didn't recognize parked across the street. It had been there since yesterday. Let's just say my family situation is getting complicated. After I hung up, Frank was shaking his head. Maggie, you just declared war on social media. Frank, they declared war when they decided to publicly question my mental state. I'm just making sure everyone knows the real story before they can twist it further. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Your son owes my people $75,000. Payment is due Friday, or there will be consequences. Thought you should know. A concerned friend. I showed Frank the message, and his face went pale. Gambling debts, he said grimly. That explains the desperation. $75,000. I wasn't surprised. Derek had always been irresponsible with money, but the amount was staggering. Maggie, people kill for a lot less than that. And if Derek owes money to loan sharks, then my son just became a very dangerous man, I finished. Frank, I need you to do me a favor. Name it. I need you to be my witness for whatever comes next. Because at 68, I'd learned that when family turns against you, you better have friends ready to stand with you. And something told me I was going to need all the allies I could get. By 10 a.m., I had my answer about how far they'd go, because that's when Tiffany showed up at my door with a social worker. Mrs. Caldwell, I'm Janet Morrison from Adult Protective Services. I received a call about some concerns regarding your welfare. Janet looked like she'd rather be anywhere else on Earth, which told me she'd probably already figured out this was a family dispute, disguised as a wellness check. I stepped onto the porch, keeping my voice level and my eyes on Tiffany. 45 years of dealing with people trying to take advantage of me had taught me how to handle this situation. What kind of concerns, Ms. Morrison? Your daughter-in-law contacted our office. She's worried that you might be experiencing some cognitive issues, making impulsive financial decisions, that sort of thing. Tiffany stood behind Janet wearing an expression of fake concern that would have won her an Oscar if acting paid as well as manipulation. I see. And based on a phone call from someone who sees me maybe 6 times a year, you felt a home visit was warranted? Janet had the grace to look uncomfortable. Mrs. Caldwell, I have to follow up on all reports, but I'll be honest, you seem perfectly lucid to me. That's because I am perfectly lucid. Unlike some people, I don't consider it mentally unstable to refuse to hand over my life savings to pay someone else's gambling debts. Tiffany's face went white. I don't know what you're talking about. I pulled out my phone and showed Janet the text message. $75,000 ring any bells, Tiffany? Because I got a very interesting text this morning about Derek's debts. Janet looked between us like she was watching a tennis match. Mrs. Caldwell, would you mind if I asked you a few questions? Just standard procedure. For the next 10 minutes, Janet ran through a basic mental competency assessment. What year was it? Who was the president? Could I count backward from 100 by sevens? Child's play for someone who'd been balancing farm books for 45 years. Mrs. Caldwell, you're clearly in full possession of your faculties, Janet concluded. I'll note in my report that this appears to be a family financial dispute rather than a competency issue. Tiffany's mask finally slipped completely. This is ridiculous. She's being manipulated by fortune hunters. That farm should have stayed in the family. Ma'am, Janet said patiently, Mrs. Caldwell has every right to sell her property and manage her finances as she sees fit. Unless she's been declared incompetent by a court, no one else has any legal claim to her assets. After they left, I didn't sit around feeling sorry for myself. Instead, I called my lawyer, Patricia Hughes. Patricia's been handling legal work for our family since Joe and I bought the farm, and she doesn't suffer fools gladly. Margaret, based on what you've told me, we need to meet this afternoon, she said after I explained the morning's events. And bring any documentation you have about threats or harassment. 2 hours later, I was sitting in Patricia's office with a folder full of evidence, screenshots of Tiffany's Facebook post, the text about Derek's gambling debts, photos of the car that had been watching my house. They're following a playbook, Patricia said, pulling out a thick folder. I've seen it before. First, they establish a pattern of concern. The Facebook post, the call to your doctor, the APS visit. Then, they'll probably try to get witnesses to testify about your supposedly erratic behavior. What kind of witnesses? Anyone who'll say you've been acting strangely. Store clerks who might remember you seeming confused. Neighbors who could testify about unusual behavior, that sort of thing. But I haven't been acting strangely. Doesn't matter. Memory is unreliable, and people can be convinced they saw things that never happened, especially if those people want to help a concerned family member. Patricia pulled out another document. Margaret, I'm going to recommend something that might seem extreme, but given the circumstances, I think it's necessary. I'm listening. I want you to undergo a comprehensive psychological evaluation. Not because I think you need one, but because I want ironclad documentation of your mental competency before they can muddy the waters further. How long will that take? Doctor, Sarah Chen can see you tomorrow. She specializes in competency evaluations, and her reports hold up in court. Schedule it, I said without hesitation. And Patricia, I want you to start documenting everything. Every threat, every attempt at manipulation, every lie they tell. When this goes to court, and it will go to court, I want to be ready. Margaret, you need to understand something. If Derek is really in debt to dangerous people, this situation could escalate beyond legal maneuvering. Then I better make sure I'm prepared for whatever comes next. That evening, I sat on my front porch with Joe's old shotgun across my lap, something I hadn't done since the coyotes were getting into the chicken coop 5 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on me, protecting myself from my own family instead of wild animals. My phone buzzed with another text from Derek. Mom, we need to talk. This has gotten out of hand. Can I come over? I stared at the message for a long time before responding. No, any further communication goes through my lawyer. The reply came immediately. You're making a big mistake. I looked out over what used to be my farmland, now marked with survey stakes and future home of Highland Meadows signs, and smiled grimly. No, Derek, I said aloud to the empty night. The mistake was yours when you decided to threaten your mother. Because at 68, I'd learned that sometimes the best defense is a good offense, and I was about to go on the attack. The psychological evaluation confirmed what I already knew. I was as sharp as a tack and twice as ornery. Dr. Chen's report read like a glowing review. Patient demonstrates excellent cognitive function, clear reasoning ability, and appropriate judgment in all assessed areas. Your son isn't going to like this, Patricia warned as she reviewed the results in her office Friday morning. Patricia, at my age, I've stopped worrying about what disappoints Derek. What I care about is protecting myself from whatever he's planning next. Speaking of which, she said, sliding a manila envelope across her desk. This came by messenger an hour ago. Inside was a petition for guardianship, filed by Derek Caldwell, requesting that the court declare his mother, Margaret Caldwell, mentally incompetent, and appoint him as her legal guardian with full control over her finances and medical decisions. The petition painted a picture of a woman in rapid mental decline. Margaret Caldwell has recently exhibited increasingly erratic behavior, including making impulsive financial decisions without family consultation, displaying paranoid tendencies, and showing signs of confusion and memory loss. Petitioner requests immediate intervention to protect Mrs. Caldwell from further exploitation and to ensure her assets are properly managed for her care and welfare. I read through the entire document twice, my anger building with each fabricated allegation. The hearing is scheduled for next Friday, Patricia noted. They're claiming it's an emergency situation requiring expedited review. Can they do that? Unfortunately, yes. And Margaret, there's something else. They've also filed for a temporary restraining order preventing you from making any financial transactions over $5,000 pending the competency hearing. I set the papers down carefully, fighting the urge to crumple them. They're trying to freeze my money. They're trying to trap you. No access to funds means limited ability to fight them legally. It's actually quite clever. Cleverly diabolical, you mean. I leaned back in my chair, thinking through the implications. Patricia, they've made one crucial mistake. What's that? They assume I'm going to fight this defensively, but I've been thinking offense since the day Derek first threatened me. Patricia raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? I mean, I've been documenting everything. Every threat, every lie, every attempt at manipulation. And I've been gathering evidence of Derek's real motivation, those gambling debts. I pulled out my own folder, considerably thicker than when I'd started. Ruby Martinez has been doing some investigating for me. Derek doesn't just owe $75,000 to loan sharks. He's in debt to at least 3 different gambling operations, plus maxed out credit cards and a mortgage that's underwater. How much total? Close to $200,000. They're financially desperate, Patricia. This isn't just greed, it's survival. That actually makes them more dangerous. Or more predictable. I spread out photographs Ruby had obtained. Derek at various gambling establishments. Documents showing his credit rating. Records of missed mortgage payments. When people are desperate, they make mistakes. Patricia studied the evidence. This is good, Margaret. But we need more than just proof of his financial problems. We need to show he's actively trying to manipulate the system. Already working on it. I pulled out my phone and showed her a recording app. Every conversation since this started has been recorded. Derek threatening me, Tiffany's fake concern, the loan shark's text, all documented. You've been busy. 45 years of problem solving, Patricia. When somebody comes after what's mine, I don't just defend, I attack. We spent the next hour going through potential witnesses and evidence. Derek had been thorough. Statements from store clerks who supposedly witnessed me acting confused, neighbors who claimed I'd been asking strange questions about my property value, even a supposed expert witness who specialized in elder financial abuse. There's one more thing, Patricia said as I prepared to leave. I had an interesting conversation with a private investigator this morning. Someone hired him to do surveillance on you last week. Surveillance? Following you around, documenting your activities, taking photos. He didn't realize what he was getting into when he took the job, and when he figured out it was family spying on family, he got uncomfortable. Did he say who hired him? Woman named Tiffany Caldwell. Paid cash, said she was worried about her mother-in-law's safety. So they'd been watching me, documenting my every move, looking for ammunition. The truck purchase, my visit to the bank, probably even my meeting with Dr. Chen. Building a case piece by piece. But they'd made a critical error. They'd hired someone with a conscience. Patricia, I want to hire that investigator myself. Turn the tables on them. Are you sure that's wise? At my age, wisdom is knowing when to stop playing defense and start playing offense. I drove home with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt since Joe died. For 3 years, I'd been drifting, going through the motions of living. But Derek's betrayal had awakened something in me. The fighter who'd built this farm from nothing, who'd survived every challenge life threw at her. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed the same black sedan parked across the street. This time, instead of feeling intimidated, I felt energized. Let them watch. Let them document. Let them underestimate the 68-year-old woman who was about to teach them that threatening your mother was the biggest mistake of their lives. Because the war was just beginning, and I intended to win it. I didn't call the police about the break-in I discovered that afternoon. Instead, I did something that would have made Joe proud. I got creative. I'd come home from Patricia's office to find my back door standing open and muddy footprints leading through my kitchen. On my kitchen table, arranged in a neat row, were photographs, pictures of me going to the bank, entering Patricia's office, talking to Dr. Chen, and underneath them, a handwritten note. Stop fighting this, Mom. You're going to lose anyway, and you're just making it harder on everyone. Be smart for once in your life. Derek. At 68, I'd seen enough of life to know that some people mistake kindness for weakness. Derek had apparently forgotten that the woman who raised him was the same woman who'd run a farm through 3 recessions and 2 droughts. Instead of calling the police, I called the security company and had a top-of-the-line system installed within hours. Not the basic package Derek probably expected, but a sophisticated setup with motion sensors, night vision, and remote monitoring that uploaded everything to the cloud. Mrs. Caldwell, this is pretty high-end equipment, the installer noted. You expecting trouble? Let's just say I want to make sure any future visitors are properly documented. While the cameras were being installed, I drove to see my old friend Ruby Martinez, who runs the most efficient information network in 3 counties. Ruby knows everything about everyone, and more importantly, she remembers it all. Maggie, honey, I've been wondering when you'd show up, Ruby said, pouring coffee without being asked. Heard you're having some family troubles. Nothing I can't handle. But Ruby, I need a favor, and I'm willing to pay for it. Name it. I need to know everything you can find out about Derek and Tiffany's financial situation. Debts, spending habits, who they owe money to, everything. And I need it fast. Ruby's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. Honey, you came to the right person. Give me 48 hours. Sunday evening, Ruby called with a report that exceeded my expectations. Maggie, those kids of yours are in trouble up to their eyeballs. Derek's got gambling debts all over the state, and Tiffany's been running up credit cards like there's no tomorrow. How much are we talking about? Near as I can figure, about $200,000 in total debt. The house is mortgaged to the hilt, both cars are financed, and they've got at least 6 credit cards maxed out. $200,000? Even expecting bad news, the amount was staggering. Gets worse. Derek's been borrowing from some very unfriendly people. The kind who don't send polite reminder notices when payments are late. That explained the urgency. They weren't just greedy. They were desperate. Monday morning brought another surprise. Patricia called at 7 a.m. with news that changed everything. Margaret, you need to get down here immediately. Someone tried to break into my office last night. I found Patricia in her office with a police officer and a mess of scattered files. They were specifically looking for your file, she explained. Didn't take anything, but they photographed documents, probably hoping to find something they could use against you in court. Did they find anything useful? That's just it. Whoever did this wasn't very bright. They photographed Dr. Chen's evaluation, your medical records, all the stuff that proves you're completely competent. The police officer, a young man named Thompson, looked up from his notes. Mrs. Caldwell, your lawyer mentioned you might have some idea who could be behind this. Before I could answer, my phone rang. Derek, Mom, I think we should meet. This whole legal thing is getting out of hand. I looked at Officer Thompson, who nodded and mouthed, keep him talking. Is that right, Derek? Yeah, family shouldn't be fighting in court. Maybe we can work something out. What kind of something? Well, maybe you don't need all that money. What are you going to do with $800,000? You could give me and Tiffany enough to pay off our debts, and everyone would be happy. How much would that be? Oh, maybe $300,000. That would leave you plenty for your retirement. $300,000. More than enough to cover their debts and give them a comfortable cushion. And Derek was talking about it like he was doing me a favor. And if I say no? There was a pause. Mom, you really don't want to go to court. Things might come out that would be embarrassing for everyone. What kind of things? Well, people might start wondering about Dad's death. How convenient it was that he died right before the farm value really took off. The implication hit me like a physical blow. Derek was threatening to suggest I'd somehow been involved in Joe's death from cancer 3 years ago. Officer Thompson was taking notes furiously. Derek, are you threatening me? I'm not threatening anyone. I'm just saying that competency hearings can bring up all sorts of family history. Things that might look suspicious to people who don't know the real story. I see. And this meeting you want to have, where did you have in mind? How about the old barn on the property? Tonight around 8? Nice and private, so we can talk without interruptions. After I hung up, Officer Thompson looked grim. Mrs. Caldwell, that sounded like a pretty clear threat to me. And that location he suggested, isolated, no witnesses. I don't like it. Neither do I, Patricia agreed. Margaret, you can't meet with him alone. Actually, I said, thinking of those new security cameras and 45 years of dealing with problems head-on, I have a better idea. That night at 8 o'clock, Derek pulled up to my house expecting to find a confused, frightened old woman ready to cave to his demands. Instead, he found someone who'd spent 45 years dealing with problems and had no intention of backing down to a spoiled brat with gambling debts, even if that spoiled brat happened to be her son. Derek walked into my kitchen like he owned the place, which was clearly still his mindset despite everything that had happened. What he didn't know was that every word he was about to say was being recorded in high definition. Mom, I'm glad you decided to be reasonable about this. Sit down, Derek. Let's have that talk. I gestured to the kitchen table, positioning myself so the cameras had clear sight lines. He settled at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd fed him breakfast every school morning for 18 years. The irony wasn't lost on me that this was where our relationship would officially end. Here's the thing, Derek began, pulling out a folder with the confidence of a man who thought he held all the cards. I've got the guardianship papers ready to file. But we don't have to go that route if you're willing to be sensible. Define sensible. Sign over power of attorney to me. Give me access to the farm money. In exchange, I'll drop the competency case and we can go back to being a normal family. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and tried to find some trace of the boy who used to bring me dandelions and call them flowers. All I saw was a stranger wearing his face. And if I refuse, Derek's expression hardened. Then we go to court, and you lose. Mom, I've got witnesses lined up who'll testify about your erratic behavior. Store clerks who'll say you seemed confused, neighbors who'll swear you were acting paranoid. Lying witnesses, you mean. People remember what they need to remember, especially when they're trying to help a concerned family member protect his elderly mother. You paid them. Derek shrugged without shame. I motivated them to do the right thing. The point is, you can't win this fight. Even if you somehow convince the judge you're competent now, I'll just keep filing petitions. Every 6 months, every year, I'll make your life hell until you give me what I want. At 68, I'd learned to control my temper, but Derek was testing limits I'd forgotten I had. And what exactly do you want, Derek? What's mine? What should have been mine all along? Your father and I worked every day for 45 years to build that farm. You've never worked a single day on that land. I shouldn't have to. I'm family. That money belongs to the family. No, Derek. That money belongs to me. His face flushed red. You selfish old woman. You'd rather see your own son destroyed than share what you'll never be able to spend anyway? I'd rather see my son learn to stand on his own 2 feet instead of gambling away money he never earned. Derek stood up so fast his chair fell backward. You know what? Fine. We'll do this the hard way. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Tiffany? Yeah, she's being stubborn. Activate Plan B. Plan B. That didn't sound good. Derek, what's Plan B? He smiled, and it was the most chilling expression I'd ever seen on my child's face. You'll find out soon enough. After Derek left, I sat in my kitchen, reviewing the digital recording. Every threat, every admission of bribery, every promise to make my life hell, all captured in perfect clarity. My phone rang at 10:30. Tiffany, Margaret, I just wanted you to know that Derek and I are very disappointed in your decision tonight. I'm sure you are. We really hoped we could resolve this quietly, within the family. But since you've chosen to be difficult, we're going to have to take other measures. What kind of measures? Well, starting tomorrow, we're going to be sharing some very interesting information with your friends and neighbors about your mental state, about the questionable circumstances surrounding Joe's death, about how you've been hiding assets from the family. All lies. Maybe, but you know how people talk in a small town. Once rumors start, they have a way of taking on a life of their own. The threat was clear. They were going to destroy my reputation, turn my friends and neighbors against me, make me a pariah in the community I'd called home for 45 years. And that's not all, Tiffany continued. We've also been in touch with some very interesting people who have a financial interest in Derek's well-being. My blood ran cold. The loan sharks. They're very concerned about Derek's ability to pay his debts, but they're also very understanding about family obligations. They know that sometimes elderly parents need a little encouragement to help their children. Are you threatening to have me hurt? I'm not threatening anything. I'm just saying that Derek's creditors are aware of his family situation, and they're willing to be very creative about debt collection. After she hung up, I didn't sit around feeling sorry for myself. At 68, I'd learned that wallowing in self-pity was a luxury I couldn't afford. Instead, I called Patricia. Margaret, do you know what time it is? Patricia, I need you to do something first thing tomorrow morning. I want you to set up a trust. What kind of trust? The kind that puts every penny of that farm money beyond Derek's reach. No matter what happens to me. There was a pause. Margaret, are you all right? You sound different. I'm not scared, Patricia. I'm angry. And when I get angry, I get very creative about solving problems. What kind of creative? The kind that's going to teach my son that threatening his mother was the biggest mistake he ever made. Because Derek and Tiffany had made one crucial error in their planning. They assumed I was just a helpless old woman who would fold under pressure. They clearly didn't know me very well. Tuesday morning, I discovered just how serious Derek and Tiffany were about their threats. By 8 a.m., half the town had heard about my mental decline. Frank knocked on my door before I'd finished my first cup of coffee. "Maggie, there's some nasty talk going around town. You need to know what people are saying." "Let me guess. I'm going senile, hiding money from my poor, devoted son, and probably killed my husband for the insurance money?" Frank's expression confirmed my suspicions. "How did you know?" "Because I know exactly who's spreading these rumors and why." My phone had been ringing since 6 a.m. Old friends calling with barely concealed curiosity, wanting to hear my side of the story. Neighbors offering help with difficult family situations. The church secretary asking if I needed someone to help with my finances. Each conversation was a careful dance, people fishing for information while pretending to offer support. In a small town, gossip spreads faster than wildfire and burns twice as hot. But at 68, I'd learned that sometimes the best defense is a good offense. I called Ruby Martinez. "Ruby, remember that investigating you did for me? Well, now I need you to share what you found." "Honey, are you sure?" "Once this gets out, there's no putting it back." "I'm sure. People deserve to know the truth about Derek and Tiffany's financial situation before they start feeling too sorry for them." Ruby went to work with the efficiency of a military operation. By 3 o'clock, word was spreading through town about Derek's gambling debts, Tiffany's maxed-out credit cards, and their desperate attempt to steal their elderly mother's money. The tide of public opinion began to shift faster than I'd expected. At 4 o'clock, I got a call from Dr. Phillips. "Margaret, I've had some very disturbing conversations today. Several people have asked me about your mental state, your cognitive function. Someone's been suggesting that you're not competent to handle your own affairs." "What did you tell them?" "The truth, that you're in excellent health and sharp as ever. But Margaret, I'm concerned about what's behind these inquiries." "Family greed, doctor. Nothing more complicated than that." That evening, Derek called, and I could hear the panic in his voice. "Mom, people are saying terrible things about Tiffany and me, lies about our finances, about gambling debts. You need to make them stop." "Derek, I have no control over what people say. This is your fault. You're the one spreading these rumors." "No, son, I'm just the one who stopped covering up your mistakes. You're destroying our reputation. You destroyed your own reputation the minute you decided to threaten your mother for money. We're family. Family doesn't break into each other's houses. Family doesn't hire private investigators to spy on each other. Family doesn't threaten to have loan sharks hurt their own mother." There was a long silence. Finally, Derek's voice came back, cold and calculating. "Fine. You want to play hardball? Game on." He hung up, and I knew the real war was about to begin. Wednesday morning brought the first direct assault. I woke up to find my car tires slashed and "thief" spray-painted across my garage door. Frank found me cleaning off the paint when he came by for his morning check-in. "Maggie, this has gone too far. You need to call the police." "Already done," I said, holding up my phone. "Officer Thompson is on his way." "And Frank?" "My security cameras caught everything." Before Frank could respond, a black pickup truck pulled into my driveway. 2 men got out. Large, intimidating types who clearly weren't there for a social visit. "Mrs. Caldwell?" the larger one called out. "We need to have a conversation." Frank immediately stepped in front of me, but I put a hand on his arm. 45 years of dealing with difficult people had taught me that showing fear only made things worse. "Gentlemen, you're on private property. State your business or leave. This is private family business. Derek Caldwell owes us money, and we understand his mother has the means to help him out." "I don't know anything about my son's debts," I said firmly. "And I'm not responsible for paying them." The second man smiled unpleasantly. "Ma'am, family is family. Sometimes elderly parents need help understanding their obligations. Are you threatening me?" "We're explaining the situation. Derek owes $75,000. Interest is accruing daily. We're sure a loving mother wouldn't want to see her son hurt over money she could easily afford to pay." Frank had his phone out. "I'm calling the police." "Go ahead," the first man said calmly. "We're just having a conversation." What they didn't know was that my security system was recording everything, and Officer Thompson was already on his way. After they left, I sat on my porch waiting for the police, not feeling victimized, but energized. Derek had escalated to sending criminals to threaten me, which meant he was getting desperate. And desperate people make mistakes. When Officer Thompson arrived, I had digital video of the entire encounter, along with Derek's recorded threats from the night before. Mrs. Caldwell, this is serious evidence of criminal intimidation. We can arrest your son today. Not yet, I said. I want to see how far he's willing to go. Because at 68, I'd learned that sometimes you have to let your enemies dig their own graves. And Derek was doing a beautiful job with the shovel. Thursday morning, I walked into that courtroom dressed in my best Sunday suit and carrying a briefcase that contained enough ammunition to blow Derek and Tiffany's case to smithereens. Judge Harrison was a fair man who'd presided over disputes in our county for 20 years. He didn't like his time wasted, and he especially didn't like family members who tried to manipulate the system. Derek and Tiffany sat at the plaintiff's table with their lawyer, a slick-looking man from the city who probably charged more per hour than most people made in a week. They looked confident, almost smug. They shouldn't have, Patricia whispered in my ear as we took our seats. Margaret, are you sure about this strategy? It's risky. Patricia, I've been taking risks my whole life. Joe and I risked everything when we bought that farm. I risked everything again when I had to run it alone after he died. This is just one more risk. Derek's lawyer, a man named Ashford, stood up to present their case. He painted a picture of a woman in rapid mental decline, making impulsive decisions, showing paranoid behavior, and desperately in need of protection from her own poor judgment. He presented their witnesses, store clerks who testified about my supposedly confused behavior, neighbors who swore I'd been acting strangely, even a handwriting expert who claimed my signature on the farm sale documents showed signs of cognitive impairment. It was a masterful performance, built on lies and paid testimony, but masterful nonetheless. Then it was our turn. Patricia stood up with a confidence that made Derek's smug expression falter. Your Honor, the petitioners have presented an elaborate fiction designed to mask their real motivation, getting control of Margaret Caldwell's money to pay Derek Caldwell's substantial gambling debts. Objection, Ashford called out. Mr. Caldwell's personal finances aren't relevant to his mother's mental competency. Your Honor, Patricia replied smoothly, we'll demonstrate that those finances are the entire motivation for this frivolous petition. Judge Harrison leaned forward. I'll allow it. What happened next was beautiful to watch. Patricia methodically destroyed every piece of Derek's case. The store clerks admitted under oath that they'd been paid to testify. The neighbors confessed they'd never actually witnessed any unusual behavior. Derek had simply told them what to say. The handwriting expert was revealed to be a fraud who'd been disciplined by professional associations in 3 states. But the real bombshell came when Patricia called her surprise witness. Your Honor, I called Detective Robert Collins to the stand. Derek's face went white. Tiffany actually made a small choking sound. Detective Collins took the stand and was sworn in. He looked directly at Derek as he began his testimony. Your Honor, Derek Caldwell is currently under investigation for check fraud, identity theft, and extortion. 3 weeks ago, he attempted to forge his mother's signature on bank documents to gain access to her accounts. The courtroom erupted. Ashford was on his feet objecting. Derek was whispering frantically to Tiffany, and Judge Harrison was banging his gavel for order. Furthermore, Detective Collins continued once quiet was restored, Mr. Caldwell hired known criminals to threaten and intimidate his mother. Yesterday, he directed loan sharks to her home with instructions to collect money she legally owes no one. This is outrageous, Derek shouted, standing up. She's lying. She's manipulating everyone. Mr. Caldwell, Judge Harrison said sternly, you will sit down and remain quiet or I'll have you removed from my courtroom. But Derek was beyond rational thought. She's the one who's lost her mind. She's paranoid. She's hiding money. She's turning everyone against us. Derek, Tiffany hissed, trying to pull him back into his seat. No! Derek shoved her away. I'm sick of this. That money belongs to me. I'm her son. I deserve that money more than some strangers at a development company. Judge Harrison's expression could have frozen water. Mr. Caldwell, are you stating for the record that this competency petition is motivated by your desire to control your mother's finances? Derek's lawyer was frantically trying to get his client's attention, but Derek was past caring about legal strategy. Yes, she sold our farm without consulting the family. She's being selfish and vindictive, and she's going to destroy our lives just to spite us. Derek, shut up, Tiffany pleaded. Why should I? It's the truth. We're family. That money should be helping family, not sitting in some bank account for a woman who's going to die alone anyway. The courtroom was dead silent. Even Judge Harrison looked shocked at the venom in Derek's voice. Your Honor, Patricia said quietly, I think Mr. Caldwell has just demonstrated the true nature of this petition more effectively than any testimony I could provide. Judge Harrison nodded grimly. Indeed, he has. What happened next took exactly 3 minutes. Judge Harrison dismissed the competency petition, ordered Derek to cease all harassment of his mother, and referred the matter to the district attorney for potential criminal charges. As Derek and Tiffany were escorted out by bailiffs, Derek for contempt of court after he'd started screaming at me, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks. Peace. The war was over. I'd won. But the real victory wasn't keeping my money or defeating their legal challenge. The real victory was discovering that at 68, I was stronger than I'd ever imagined. 3 days after the court hearing, I was sitting on my front porch enjoying my morning coffee when Frank brought over the local newspaper. Maggie, you might want to see the front page. The headline read, Local Families' Greed Exposed in Court. Below it was a detailed account of Derek's courtroom meltdown and the criminal charges he was now facing. The article didn't pull any punches. It described Derek's gambling debts, the forged documents, the paid witnesses, and his attempts to have his own mother declared incompetent to steal her money. The reporter had done their homework. Well, I said, folding the paper, I guess that settles the question of who's going to have a damaged reputation. My phone had been ringing all morning. Old friends calling to apologize for doubting me. Neighbors offering support. Even the pastor wanting to discuss the importance of forgiveness and family reconciliation. That last conversation had been interesting. Margaret, I know you're hurt, Pastor Williams had said, but Derek is still your son. The Lord teaches us to forgive those who wrong us. Pastor, I've forgiven Derek for being greedy, selfish, and foolish, but I haven't forgotten that he tried to steal from me, threatened me, and sent criminals to my house. Forgiveness doesn't mean stupidity. The criminal case against Derek was moving forward quickly. Detective Collins had found enough evidence to charge him with attempted fraud, extortion, and conspiracy. Tiffany was facing charges as an accomplice. Their house had been seized as part of the investigation, both cars repossessed, and Derek's gambling creditors were circling like vultures. The loan sharks who'd visited me had been arrested, and they were being remarkably cooperative about Derek's role in directing them to my home. Ruby Martinez stopped by that afternoon with updates from her extensive information network. Honey, they're finished in this town. Nobody will hire Derek. Nobody will do business with them. They're talking about moving back to her mother's place in Ohio. That's probably for the best. Maggie, I have to ask, how did you know to have all that evidence ready for court? I smiled, thinking about the hours I'd spent with Patricia preparing for every possible scenario. Ruby, I've been dealing with problems for 45 years. Weather, crop failures, equipment breakdowns, financial setbacks. The key is preparation and knowing your enemy. Your enemy? Derek stopped being my son the minute he decided my money was more important than my well-being. After that, he was just another problem to solve. That evening, I had an unexpected visitor. Tiffany showed up at my door, looking like she'd aged 10 years in the past week. Margaret, I need to talk to you. I think you've said enough, don't you? Please, just 5 minutes. Against my better judgment, I let her in. She sat at my kitchen table looking smaller and more defeated than I'd ever seen her. I want you to know that this was all Derek's idea, she began. The competency petition, the witnesses, all of it. I tried to talk him out of it, but you went along with it. I was scared. Derek owed those people so much money, and they were threatening him, us. I thought if we could just get enough money to pay them off. You thought it was acceptable to steal from his mother. Tiffany looked down at her hands. I know how it sounds, but Margaret, you have to understand. We were desperate. Desperation doesn't justify what you did. I know. I'm not trying to justify it. I'm trying to apologize. I studied my daughter-in-law's face, looking for some sign of genuine remorse beneath the self-pity. Tiffany, what exactly are you apologizing for? Trying to have me declared incompetent? Breaking into my house? Hiring someone to spy on me? Spreading lies about my mental state? Threatening to have loan sharks hurt me? Or just for getting caught? She was crying now, ugly tears that smeared her makeup. All of it. Everything. Margaret, I'm so sorry. Sorry enough to testify against Derek at his criminal trial? The question stopped her tears instantly. What? The prosecutor wants Derek to pay for what he did. Your testimony about his planning, his threats, his manipulation of evidence, that would be very helpful to their case. I can't testify against my husband. Even though he's willing to let you take the fall for conspiracy charges? Tiffany's face went pale. What do you mean? Derek's lawyer is arguing that you masterminded the whole scheme, that you manipulated Derek into going along with your plan to steal from me. Apparently, you're going to be the villain in his version of events. The look of betrayal that crossed Tiffany's face was almost satisfying. He wouldn't do that. Tiffany, the man threw you under the bus to save himself, just like he was willing to destroy his own mother for gambling money. Why would you be any different? After Tiffany left, I sat in my kitchen thinking about families and loyalty and the price of greed. Derek had destroyed not just his relationship with me, but his marriage, his reputation, and his freedom, all for money he'd never earned and never deserved. The phone rang. Patricia. Margaret, I have news about the criminal case. Derek's been offered a plea deal. What kind of deal? 18 months in prison, full restitution for your legal fees, and a permanent restraining order. He'd also have to publicly admit that you were never mentally incompetent and that the entire petition was fraudulent. And if he doesn't take it, then he goes to trial and faces up to 10 years if convicted on all charges. I thought about it for a moment. Patricia, what do you recommend? Take the deal. It gives you everything you wanted: vindication, compensation, and protection from future harassment. Then that's what we'll do. 6 months later, I was sitting on the porch of my new house, a comfortable place on 5 acres just outside town, reading about Derek's release from county jail. He'd served 8 months of his sentence and been paroled for good behavior. The newspaper mentioned that he and Tiffany had divorced and that he'd moved to Ohio to start over. I felt no satisfaction in his downfall, but no regret either. Derek had made his choices, and now he was living with the consequences. As for me, I was living proof that sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to be a victim. 1 year later, I was hosting Thanksgiving dinner in my new house for a very different kind of family than the one I'd been born into. Frank was there, of course, along with Ruby Martinez and her grandson. Dr. Phillips and his wife joined us, as did Patricia and Detective Collins, who'd become an unexpected friend through this whole ordeal. Margaret, Ruby said as we cleared the dishes, I have to ask, do you ever regret how things turned out with Derek? It was a question I'd been asked many times over the past year. By friends, by my pastor, even by the therapist I'd seen briefly to help process the trauma of being betrayed by my own child. Ruby, I regret that Derek chose greed over family. I regret that he let gambling destroy his judgment. I regret that he was willing to hurt his own mother for money. But do I regret standing up for myself? Not for a second. What about forgiveness? Dr. Phillips asked gently. Some people think you were too hard on him. I've forgiven Derek for being weak, for making bad choices, for disappointing me. But forgiveness doesn't mean pretending it never happened, or making myself vulnerable to being hurt again. Detective Collins raised his glass. To Margaret Caldwell, who proved that farm women are tougher than they look. I'll drink to that, Frank said. As my chosen family laughed and shared stories around my table, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. A year ago, I'd been a woman whose son saw her as nothing more than a source of money. Today, I was surrounded by people who valued me for who I was, not what I could give them. The farm money? I'd put most of it in a trust that would eventually benefit local charities. Some went to a scholarship fund for young people who wanted to study agriculture. A portion helped fund a program for elderly people dealing with financial abuse from family members. I kept enough for a comfortable retirement, my new house, and the occasional trip to places Joe and I had always wanted to visit, but never could afford. 3 weeks ago, I'd gotten a letter from Derek. No return address, postmarked from somewhere in Ohio. In it, he'd written a brief apology and asked if there was any chance we could reconcile. I'd thought about that letter for a long time before writing back. Derek, I'd written, I will always love the little boy who brought me dandelions and called them flowers. But that little boy grew up to be a man who tried to steal from his mother and destroy her life for gambling money. I've forgiven you, but I will never trust you again. I hope you've learned from your mistakes and found a way to live with integrity. Take care of yourself. I'd mailed it without including my return address. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. But that doesn't mean you can't build new ones. As Thanksgiving dinner wound down and my friends prepared to leave, Frank lingered on the porch. Maggie, you know you saved a lot of people with how you handled this situation, don't you? What do you mean? You proved that elderly folks don't have to be victims. You showed that families can't just steamroll their older members because they think they're entitled to their money. You changed how people think about these situations. I looked out over my new property, at the small vegetable garden I'd planted, at the bird feeders that attracted cardinals and blue jays every morning. Frank, I didn't set out to change anything. I just refused to let my son steal from me. Sometimes that's all it takes. As Frank drove away, I sat on my porch watching the sun set over my new life. A life built on my own terms, surrounded by people who respected me, free from the fear and manipulation that had defined those terrible months with Derek and Tiffany. My phone buzzed with a text from my neighbor's granddaughter, a young woman who'd started stopping by to hear my stories about farming and standing up for yourself. Mrs. Caldwell, my boyfriend has been pressuring me to lend him money for his business. After hearing about what you went through, I told him no. He didn't like it, but I stood my ground. Thank you for showing me it's okay to protect myself. I smiled as I typed back. Good for you, honey. Never let anyone make you feel guilty for keeping what you've earned. As the stars came out over my 5 acres, I thought about the woman I'd become through this ordeal. Stronger, wiser, more selective about who I allowed in my life. Derek had tried to make me a victim. Instead, he'd made me a survivor. And in the end, that was a gift I hadn't expected, but would treasure for the rest of my days. The farm was gone, sold to developers who would turn it into suburban homes. But what I'd built on that land, my strength, my independence, my refusal to be anyone's victim, that was mine forever. Some inheritances, after all, are worth more than money. And no one, not even family, can steal what truly belongs to you. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.